Well, welcome everyone to the November 16th, 2021 meeting of the Housing and Community Development Committee. We have a quorum, so I declare us ready to meet. And so the first item is suspension of the rules. Would someone make a motion to suspend the rules to allow people to allow us to meet either electronically or by phone?
I move suspension of the rules.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. And I guess, Sarah, do you need to take a roll
Yes.
call for this? Okay. Marian.
And I just need a second to make sure I can promote one person to panelist. Chair Revelle,
Here.
Council Member Burns,
This is a vote for the suspension of the rules, so, right?
Yes.
Aye.
I, yes, right. I is the one to say.
Council Member Newsma,
Mhm.
I'm not sure if he's able to.
He's muted at the moment.
He's on mute right now.
Aye, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Thank
Aye.
you.
Council Member Reed,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Monica Bobo,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Kathy Feingold,
Aye.
Joanne Zolmish.
She's saying that her audio doesn't work.
Oh dear.
She just sent a group chat. I'm here, but my audio does not work.
Oh dear.
Ah,
Hmm. Is that a
Can she vote on a message?
problem?
I
And-
think so, but or we
Yeah.
have, I mean, it would be approved even without, but Joanne, if you can put that you vote aye, that would be great. We'll count that.
Okay.
I'm trying to see if I can ask her to unmute. And I'm not seeing a chat. Are you
No,
guys?
I'm not either.
I am. Her chat says that it went to host and panelists at 7:06. It says I'm here, but my audio does not work. Joanne.
Yeah.
Oh, this is very strange.
Maybe if she logged off and
Log
started
off and
over
log
again.
back in, maybe that would be worth trying.
Okay. Council Member Newsma, were you able to get the device you wanted to get logged in?
Yes, I am here. I'll be
Okay.
logging back in from the laptop in a few minutes.
Okay, just making
phone
sure
for
that
now.
everybody's technology is working. How do we want to move forward? Because I'm not, I don't quite understand why I'm not seeing, I should be seeing a chat from a panelist.
Do you
No,
want
no.
here? Do you want me to send one as a test?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I mean, they are all saved in the file.
I just sent test.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that.
I can see it.
We already got it.
Okay.
But I'm not able to.
And now Joanne wrote, I can't unmute. I'm getting a new monitor tomorrow. I vote aye. For some reason, I'm not connecting, only phone.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Sarah, if you can see the chat, then we shouldn't, I mean, usually we don't, we only, I can cover that actually right now, because that's when we're going to cover it. So I'm just going to mention that the suspension of the rule has passed 9-0.
Okay.
And I was going to make a quick announcement around public participation to clarify how things can work. So for all the attendees that are here, we have so far 5 attendees. We got a request last meeting so that the attendees could see who has joined. We looked into it with the company and it is not possible. So what I will do is at the beginning of each meeting, I will read and share with the group who is present so everybody can be aware. Currently, we have 5 attendees, Duncan Anu, Jessica McNeary, Nathaniel H. Master, Rodney Orr, and Sue Lowback. Public comments will be taking place towards the end of the meeting, as per the agenda. There is a Q&A section, a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We're hoping to really use this feature specifically to ask questions, clarification around specific presentation when there is a presentation during a meeting. Anything like a statement or a broader question would most likely be better shared during the public comment time. We'll, as Q&A come in when there's a presentation, we'll try to answer as many as possible in the context of the presentation. If we don't get to all the Q&A, we'll put an answer on the website along with the presentation when it's posted. So that is that for the Q&A. I did switch on the chat so that we host can chat, send links to the public. That was another comment that we got, so that if we're sharing documents or a link to the website or anything like that, I'm able to send that that way. All chats are recorded at the same time as the meeting is. So that is it for my public participation update for today.
Great, thanks, Marion. So now we have a couple more just routine business items to take care of. We had the minutes of our October 19th meeting were in the packet. Would someone make a motion to approve those minutes?
I motion to approve them.
Okay, and a second.
Second.
Okay, can we take a roll call for that, please?
Yes. Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye. Sorry, it takes me a minute to unmute.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Lauren Berlin.
Aye.
Monica Bobo.
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez.
Aye.
Kathy Feingold.
Aye.
Joanne Zolomich.
Joanne noted that
She's-
in the chat, I approve of the minutes, so we
Right,
have her
great.
approval too.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. The minutes have been approved 920.
Okay, thank you. And then just to bring you up to date, we are, as you know, there are going to be some changes to the rules and procedures for the committee, but Sarah and Marion are still working on that, and the changes need to go to the legal department just to make sure everything's okay. So that's not quite ready to come to the committee for approval, but probably at our next meeting. Would that be a fair guess, Sarah? Okay. All right, so now we're ready for basically the meat of our meeting. And first, we're going to hear from Sarah about the 2022 draft action plan and the citizen participation plan, which is going to be underway for the next month. So
Right, actually, we're going to hear from Marion on it.
oh, Marion, all right, okay, go Marion.
Yes, I am attempting to share my screen.
I will say up front, though, that we do not expect you to have read all of this already. This is just an overview. So
Yes.
it was posted yesterday.
Okay, so we are going to be talking, or at least giving you an overview of what is exactly going on with the citizen participation plan, the draft that we posted yesterday on the website, as well as the 2022 draft action plan. As Sarah mentioned, both documents are in draft mode right now. They just were posted on the website. There is the link at the bottom of this presentation with the short URL. And they will be part of the packet next month, as well as I just sent them by email to you a little while ago. You're not expected to have reviewed them just yet. The citizen participation plan, very few changes have been made. we needed to make some changes to reflect the new committee structures. We've replaced, as you know, the Housing and Community Development Act Committee, the Housing and Homelessness Commission, and the Mental Health Board with your new current committee, Housing and Community Development, and the Social Service Committee. And there's been a little bit of changes around how Cdbg funding is handled, being split between your committee and the Social Services Committee, as you're aware. So that needed to be reflected in the citizen participation plan. And then we updated something that we piloted last year, which has made everything a lot more manageable, which is the process of allocating funding by percentage at a goal level using the total estimated grants. That simplifies a lot of things, and that also kind of helps us making sure that we're not putting ourselves in a situation of having too many substantial amendments as we work on the final action plan later next year when we get the final numbers, because that would add a lot more time on final approval, which would then mean that it would add more time onto actually getting funding. So generally speaking, we try to make sure that we can avoid additional administrative work if we can, so we can actually make sure we can do work on actual programs. So those were the two changes. The citizen participation plan, as I mentioned, is posted on the website, and any changes have been highlighted in yellow. So that's fairly easy to see as you review it. As far as the 2022 draft action plan, as well as actually the Cdbg city applications, they were provided in your packet. Sorry, the city applications were provided in the packet for review. The draft action plan just got posted yesterday. You'll have the next 4 weeks to review it, and public comment is open as of now and will be opened through the next meeting on December 14th. The public can provide comment by email, by 311, as well as at the meetings. The meat of the discussion and the vote for the draft action plan and the citizen participation plan, as well as the application, is really going to be taking place on December 14th. So this meeting tonight is to provide you some context as far as what we're going to be looking at, because it is a lot of information and we have quite a few new committee members. So that's to help you understand what exactly is being put into the action plan in higher level terms. And then as far as the Cdbg city applications, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the next meeting with the applicants. But if you are reviewing the applications and you have known questions already, what would be great is if you can send questions before Monday, 12/6 via email. That way we can get answers in writing and we can include that in the packet. That helps streamline the meeting, that helps us keep track of all the questions, and then everybody's aware of what questions been asked and can review that before the meeting. So that's one thing. The 2022 Cdbg CD applications. Now the applications that are in your packet, I believe there's 6. There are 4 that are for city infrastructure projects and 2 that are around housing program. And the reason that we're opening those specific application in December is because this is the timeline that we need to make sure there's no interruption in services, or that the capital improvement projects can be planned so that they actually happen in 2022, should they be approved. And if the grant comes in. Since you're voting in December for capital projects that are going to happen next year, but you don't yet have the final grant amount on hand, usually approvals can be based on the fact that the grant amount is going to be either the same or above it, meaning that if the funding comes out to be lower, then there can be discussion as far as was originally approved, and we can make changes. But usually we're pretty conservative with the estimates to ensure that that doesn't happen too frequently. As far as the application summary, we have, like I was mentioning, 6 projects. We have an alley improvement for $397, a sidewalk gap infill for $157, a sidewalk improvement project. That one is more floating because there's no specific location. It depends on the needs, and all of it should be located in Cdbg eligible areas. And then there's a park picnic shelter electrical improvement project that's $127. For the housing programs, we have the housing rehabilitation program for $252,500 and the code enforcement program for $325,000. As I mentioned, the full application with the detail is in your packet, and you'll have the next months to review them, ask question, and then the applicant will be there next month. I think at this point, unless you have any question, what I'd like to do is we can go over the actual draft action plan chart, which was included in your packet, which is a little bit of a complicated spreadsheet, but that will give you a good overview as far as what we are including in the draft plan so far. So I am gonna go here. I'm going to ask if you can see my screen, the chart. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So like I mentioned, this chart is available, I believe, on page 6 of your packet if you want to follow along. I'm hoping that it's large enough on my screen. I can make it a little bit bigger, but we might lose a little bit of the overview. So
Pretty good.
let me know if it's really too small.
Marian, I want to add one thing so that people understand why we're looking at goals. Because we have to post our draft action plan and have a 30-day public comment period before the start of our fiscal year, January 1, to be able to put our funding back to that date, regardless of when we get it. Usually we get our access to our grants sometime in August, sometimes September. So we have to plan of how to be able to use money on the assumption that we're going to get our grants. And the way our citizen participation plan defines what constitutes a substantial amendment. And in our citizen participation plan, a substantial amendment is an addition of a goal, a subtraction of a goal, or a change in funding for a goal of 20% or more. And so by keeping our funding in these larger categories, but not allocated to all specific projects and programs, it enables us flexibility to identify those things and have some flexibility within how that money is spent without having to trigger another 30-day public comment period. Because here's what happens. At some point, there will be a federal budget and appropriations bill, and HUD will get the amount of money for the CDBG program. They then have to allocate it to the specific grantees, and that usually, I think that has to be done within 45 days. So that's 45 days after we get the appropriations bill passed. Then we get that number and we have to update our action plan and then get it reviewed by the committee and approved by City Council. Then it goes to HUD. HUD has 45 days to review and approve it. And they frequently don't get it done in that period of time. So you can see how the time gets farther and farther and farther into our fiscal year, and we get less and less time to actually use our money for any purpose. So programs that the city has historically funded with CDBG funds that are high priorities in our consolidated plan are things that we ask be continued based on an estimate, so we can continue our rehab program and continue code enforcement with CDBG. And that, of course, affects our overall city budget too, because we sort of estimate these levels of funding coming from CDBG into our city planning, budget planning. But we've also found that in the past, for many, many years, we would do our CDBG allocations on estimates, and we would allocate to every single application that the committee chose that they wanted to fund, but we were never able to actually release funds to them until we got access to our funds. We've addressed that challenge with the social services because we've combined our CDBG funding with our city funding, which will allow us to fund on estimate, if you will, and start paying funded agencies with city funding and then give them the CDBG when that comes in. But we can't really do that with capital projects because we really don't want to float capital budgets that way. And even when we've had nonprofits apply for their public facilities improvements projects, what tends to happen is they get some estimates, they say this is their project budget. By the time we get around to implementing it, which is a year afterwards, costs have changed, the contractor isn't interested, they go through the whole process again, and it really hasn't helped anyone. But it's taken up just a whole lot of time. So that's why we do this funding by goals. And CDBG is the only funding that we allocated in advance of having our final numbers. Home and ESG, we have always waited until we've actually gotten our grant amounts and had the money available. So we think that given the current circumstances and the ongoing never having the federal budget in time to make the start of our fiscal year, this is the best way to move forward with the least sort of pain. But we wanted to give you that history because, and also so the public can hear that history, because it's like, why on earth would anyone do this? It's not our choice. We would much rather not have to deal with this. But CDBG has certain things that have to be spent in your fiscal year. For example, even our administrative costs. Now, we're still finishing up projects that were funded in prior CDBG fiscal years, because our capital projects frequently carry over. But our CDBG administration funding has to be spent in the year that it is tied to. So if we don't do this sort of thing, then what happens is we would have a big gap for like the first half of the year when our positions, for example, would not be funded. So how could we actually move the program forward? It's just really an unfortunate, complicated mess because the regulations have been changed, but there are underlining statutory rules for CDBG that account for this weirdness, and nobody knows how to solve it, but nobody's going to ask Congress to try to rule on some of this right now. It's really low on their priorities. So that's a kind of long-winded explanation, but Marion and I would never have come up with this situation. It is not something we would create. So we're just trying to deal with a way of trying to move forward with without it hindering us too much. So.
Great. Okay.
All right.
It does sound complicated.
It is.
I do have a question, Sarah, if I could.
Sure.
This is Hugo, and it's in regards to since the funds don't come in until late, it'd be good for us to know historically what has been the response from getting our funds for CDBG. Has it always been there, or has there been years that, or home or any federal funds that come to us for our purposes? Has there in the past occasions where the money is less than what we were anticipating, or the money is more, or it always comes right on the dot?
No, we have always got every single one of our entitlement grants from when we first started receiving them. There's never been a year that they have not been approved by Congress. So CDBG goes back to 1975. Home was about 1995, and I honestly don't remember when ESG was, but so we've been getting these grants for quite a while. I remember the first year that I came to the city as the CDBG administrator, the estimate which had already been made, and I came into an interesting place, which was just the application reviews, which was really kind of a being thrown into the deep end of the pool. But we received less than was estimated. And let me tell you, the worst thing is telling agencies that they're not going to get the funding that you had allocated in advance of the grants. So we try to estimate conservatively, and for the last, in the 2015 through 19 consolidated plan, we were using estimates of $1.5 million or $1.6 million, and then we went up to $1.65 million. But in 2020 and 2021, our grants have been above $1.8 million. And we also watch what the appropriations bills are being talked about in Congress. And currently, all of the appropriations bills put CDBG Home and McKinney-Vento as higher than in 2021. So what we are estimating for CDBG is $1.8 million. And now, so you have to, in the very bottom grouping,
Right.
we have a thing that says CDBG, EN, and PI. So that's the total we're talking about allocating. But the actual grant amount is off in the margin on the right. We're estimating that we'll get $1,800,000 in new entitlement money. We've already received $102,500 in program income. So that's where the other money comes from. So that's actual. That's sitting in a bank account. The 1.8 million is estimated. With Home, same thing. We're making an estimate of this 384,300. We're estimating the grant itself at 350,000, and we've already gotten the program income that makes up the difference from that. So that's how we've arrived at that. And ESG, I got to tell you, we were estimating at 150,000, and the last 2 years have been 100 and over that. So we just went all the way up to 155. So that's how we've made those estimates. Quite frankly, Home and ESG have shown very, very little differences. And we have been successful at underestimating our grants consistently. That's what we try to do. We don't want to have to go the other direction. It's really quite a pain. So.
Does
Should I
anybody
go?
have any other questions about all of this?
Which numbers should be adding up to 100%? I'm just doing some quick math here.
That's actually what I was going to review, because it is a little bit complex.
That has to be explained. It is.
So let me go over that. That's why we wanted to provide you with this update and this overview. So this chart is essentially one of the chart that is for the goal funding in the action plan. That's one of the chart you'll see in a different format in the action plan document. And we created this chart because we wanted to have a little bit more clarity, but we also wanted to add some information and for you to have historical. So the way to look at it, you have the 3 columns that provide you the historical 2020, 2021, and then the estimates for 2022. And then in here, you've got the different goals that with the total. So you see here, affordable housing goals total, and the 3 different grants that we work with. Each row has been color coded, so you can easily refer to CDBG throughout the sheet and see what it amounts to. And that's exactly for the specific question that you asked Councilmember Newsma, because we wanted to provide 2 pieces of information for you. The first one was the percentage of funding for a specific goal in relationship to the total funding. So as an example here, we have approximately $700,000 that is equivalent to 29% of this total here of all grants. But we also wanted to show you the percentage to the grant total by goal. So as an example, CDBG here, we're showing about $527,000, and that's equivalent to 28% of the grant. However, it's 28% of the actual grant, not the grant plus the program income. So that's where you might see a little bit of a difference. So as an example, to get to 100%, you could add the blue numbers here. And then you have the totals here.
That works out, but add the yellow numbers. In 2022, I only get 99.
Oh, that's because of the rounding.
Okay.
Because you have, we didn't include the rounding of the percentage just for clarity to make it a little bit simple.
So I was also adding the blue numbers, add the CDBG numbers for 2020, and I only got 95%.
I am happy to open the spreadsheet. It could also be because of the rounding number.
It could be a rounding error, and it could be me adding incorrectly.
It is challenging because we're trying to give a sort of just overview, and we do round up to an even. You know, it's like we don't want to carry the percents out too far, and there is a possibility. I'm not sure, but one of the things that I do remember, one of the times I was working on one of these spreadsheets where I found that I'd made my formulas inconsistent between whether I was looking at the actual anticipated grant or the grant and program income. So that could be, we can check for that type of an error.
But there's not something missing, like overhead administration costs are captured separately.
No, the overhead and administration costs are in the administration goal.
Okay.
And what we do is we simply allocate what they allow by the grant. CDBG allows 20%, but that actually, no, are you sure, Marion, that we're doing this as a percent? Because 360 is 20% of 1,000,008, but it is not 20% of 1,902,000. So I'm not sure. That might be a difference. I'm not a math person. I'm a word person. Sorry.
But maybe 406 is the right percentage. No, never mind.
The administration, CDBG administration, is only done, is 20% of the actual grant amount. It is not done as a percent of the grant plus program income.
Right. That's that.
Public services is just the opposite. Public services is 15% of the grant plus program income, technically. And historically, because there's a very high need for services, we have always funded that at the full 15%. So I will check to see if we had So that should be go a little lower, 19025. Oops. Yeah, that number, the 285,375, which is the public services goal, is 15% of grant plus program income.
What is an example of a public services program?
All of our social services program, all the stuff that goes to the other committee.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And it has always been the category that got the most time devoted to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of gave short shrift to some of the bricks and sticks stuff. But that is that's one of the
mm-hmm.
challenging things about this. We probably should put a note in here that the public services goal for CDBG is 15% of the 1.8 million plus the program income. So we can clarify
That could also
and give you that
explain,
again.
that could also explain if there's any discrepancy in numbers, because then your denominator is changing for some of the rows,
Exactly.
but not for other rows.
And we
So-
haven't figured out a good way to make it completely clear.
Yeah.
Because it's just not something
I get it.
that
Yeah,
It's adding up the CDBG numbers for 2020 and they added up to 95%, adding up the percentages, I should say. But for 2022, I add up the percentages and they do add up to 100.
so you can see we were inconsistent year to year.
Yeah.
We can fix that. Sorry.
So all the other goals other than public services come to this committee then? Obviously not.
Yes.
Mhm, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I can double check the spreadsheet. I just if I do that right now, I'm not going to be able to share my
Yeah.
screen. So I
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
make sure I can.
We'll
keep that on
correct it
screen.
Don't
and
worry
send
about
you
it.
any of the
Right.
corrections, and we will post corrections.
This gives us a good idea.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention is the rounding down, because we have so many categories. If it just so happened that we're rounding down on all of them, that's also
It can screw you
could
up
be-
quite a bit. Yeah.
that could change the percentage as well at the total if you just add the percentage.
Okay.
So that's also an
Yeah, of
option.
course.
One other thing to keep in mind, and I think that was one of the things we wanted to show with the spreadsheet, is we have, as you can see, quite a few areas that are grayed out.
Mhm.
And that was to give you kind of an idea as far as we have so many goals for the action plan, but not every source of funding is eligible for each goal. So as an example, so all of the gray out rows there is to give you an opportunity to understand which grant is eligible for what type of goal or what type of work. For example, ESG is not usually used for affordable housing goals. The livable community goals, which is often city infrastructure projects or nonprofit public facility project, that's not eligible. We can't use home or ESG for that. Same for public services, is only CDBG money or economic development. So that's a way to
Right.
understand which funding is usable for what.
Which shows you how more flexible CDBG is than the other sources of funding.
Right, right.
Right. The other item to keep in mind is the administration. Those are on the right. The notes are the maximum kind of advisable to use of a grant for each source of funding. As you can see, the CDBG is
It's
a
not
higher.
advisable. You can't exceed them.
Right.
Right.
You'll be giving money back if you exceed those
Yes.
in those categories.
So as you can see, the CDBG one is quite a lot higher than the other ones, and that's often related to something that Sarah mentions, has mentioned a couple times, which is the CDBG grant is quite a bit more complex and oftentimes requires quite a great deal of admin work
Mhm.
as a result.
All of the work for doing these documents, doing the con plan, the action plan, the caper, all of that time
Mhm.
basically goes against
Right.
the CDBG administration goal, because the other grants don't have enough
Mhm.
in them to be able to do
Mhm.
both the project management and the compliance and the broader consolidated plan. There are about 1,200 CDBG entitlement grantees in the country.
Mm.
And nobody gets home or ESG if they don't get CDBG. So CDBG is kind of the parent grant. I mean, you're not an entitlement community unless you get CDBG, and you might get the other grants depending on the formulas.
Mhm.
Evanston is the only suburb of Chicago that gets all three.
Wow.
And that is partly because when home was invented, the city, as I understand it, was just under the amount that would give the city its own allocation. And the city committed local funds to affordable housing in order to become a home participating jurisdiction, as it's called.
Wow.
So that's why we get home.
Okay. Good for us.
Yeah.
So committee members, do you have questions? Yeah, Kathy.
No, I was just going to thank Marion and Sarah for spelling this out for us. It's really helpful.
Thank you. I did want to add something else that I think is helpful to remember. The 2022 allocation on estimates are specific allocation for the 22 funding. In some cases, and I guess I'll use the example of housing rehab, there could be funding that has not been fully used for previous years. And in that case, that can roll over for that specific project into the next year. So that's also something to keep in mind as you're looking at the allocation. It's really specifically, how do we allocate that specific pot of money for this year? And it's just a percentage, it's a draft percentage for a goal.
Right. So there can be, in many cases, almost every time we do big capital projects, they are not completed in one fiscal year. The money is. So there are only two categories for CDBG that you have to spend your grant money in the fiscal year for which it was allocated, and that is public services and administration.
Right.
The rest of it can carry over.
Mhm.
And as long as we keep it in that same goal, we don't have to amend our action plan just because it's spent in a different year, because it's still going against that goal.
Okay.
I know, it's kind of nuts.
So can you talk to us a little bit about the citizen participation piece of this? How much citizen participation can we expect in the next month?
We have had very little citizen participation, and we certainly try to get it. We have to run an ad in a newspaper of, which is kind of, and we've run the ad. It's never been the way we get much input, but we've done it will be in the e-news. We will email all of our nonprofits who tend to be funded and be following, and ask them to publish that we're looking for public comment. And we do get occasionally, we've also done Facebook and Twitter and asked for comments, and we've gotten comments on things generally that aren't really related to the action plan, but that's okay. We send them to HUD anyway, because it shows we've engaged our public, but we don't get a whole lot of public input at this stage. Remember, we did a lot of getting public input to develop the consolidated plan,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I don't know, we just don't get a whole lot of public input.
Yeah. Okay.
At this stage.
Right.
And I think maybe it's partly because we do get public, because remember, when we allocate additional funding, like when the public services is allocated by the Social Services Committee, that will go through the committee, it will go through the Human Services Committee, and then it'll go to council. And so if we get comment at those, we tend to give that to HUD if it's in advance, it's,
Right.
so we certainly try to get input, but
Yeah.
we don't always.
Right. Okay.
This is not uncommon for other grantees either. People are just kind of like, the format of the plans I don't consider user-friendly.
Right.
It doesn't really inform you. And our HUD reps don't even look at the written up plan. They look at the tables in IDIS and doing their net. It's really, so I think that the format does not facilitate public input,
Right.
but we didn't create the format. So, sorry, I don't have very good explanations for some of it. It's just the way it's been done by HUD. So,
yeah. So is there more for us to talk about about the draft action plan, or should we move on to the applications that we have to talk about tonight?
yeah, I think we can move on. We don't really, we wanted to go do the overview. We don't really, we will have people like Laura Biggs at the, or somebody from her team, and we will have people at the December meeting to answer any questions. We can certainly do some top line questions, but, or if you even just want explanation of like, well, what is this and why do we do it? We'll be happy to do that. But I just, we don't have our actual applicants here in all cases. So we want to make sure that you get the opportunity to ask questions of them at the next meeting. So why don't we go to our list that we had up there in the slides, and we can just
yeah, I had
or right, or we could go to the memo. So
similar.
Okay.
Are you guys able to see it?
Yep.
I can give you a real top line of kind of how public, you remember the maps that we show you, and the maps that are in, that we're always, that are in the packet of
the census,
what areas are eligible for public infrastructure. Well, those are the areas we're limited to when we do things like alley improvements.
Right.
And so those are a matching of the areas where we have things like alleys that need to be paved and in eligible areas. Now, one of the things you might go, why do we use money for alleys? The way the city normally does alley paving is through a 50-50 cost sharing. The city pays half the cost, and the property owners pay the other cost through a special assessment.
We used to do it that way. We're going to be doing it different.
Yes, that's how we've done it historically. Right.
I'm sorry, you said alleys. I was thinking sidewalks.
No. Yeah, alleys, I think they're staying with the 50-50.
Yes.
Alley special assessments can get really
expensive,
quite large. I've seen alleys where they've been over 10,000. But the areas where we can pave alleys are only the areas that are yellow but don't have hash mark lines through them.
Okay.
And we've had funny things happen. We've had pretty significant changes in some of these areas from like a 5-year period to another 5-year period. There is a census block group 809204, which is right there, that in our last con plan had a low mod population of 11.9%, and then it dramatically popped up to over 61%. And before that, it had been like 52 in the period before. Remember, this is American Community Survey data, very small sampling that is then projected. So I think a census tract is probably pretty accurate overall, but when you get down to the block group levels, you can get some real anomalies. But still, we're stuck with what HUD says are areas that are eligible. And when we enter data into IDIS, it's geocoded. And so they look at it, and if it is not eligible, then we can't fund it unless we have done a survey that we have done. And to do a survey, you have to develop your survey, you have to get it approved by HUD, you have to send them the results, and then if they approve it, then you can use that survey for a low mod area benefit. But so we look for, but still the areas where you're seeing that are showing up as yellow are areas that generally have significant lower income populations. So historically, because alley pavings has been done through this 50-50, alleys weren't being paved in the CDBG target areas or in the lower income areas because people couldn't afford that kind of a special assessment. And so it really is some of our early equity work and trying to get equitable public improvements, infrastructure improvements to areas where the people can't afford to put in 50% of the cost of something like this. So I think that's, and also alley paving is not something you can use motor fuel tax funding for, which is what we use for most of our road resurfacing and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons we do a lot of alley paving. And alley paving not only makes, improves people's, it's easier for the garbage trucks, it's easier for emergency vehicles if they have to get back there. Along with the alley paving is drainage. And as you know, we are having more and more problems with drainage and flooding and things like that. So this is really, I think, a very important thing. And that's why we continue to bring you alley pavings as part of, and they tend to be expensive, you know.
Yeah.
$390 is a lot of money. And if we can do that with our CDBG and really improve an area that otherwise would not probably get its alley paved, that is one of the goals of the program. So we're also recommending some sidewalk projects because again, we have some sidewalk areas that are not, that the sidewalks are in really not good shape. No, CDBG target area doesn't work for sidewalks. It's still the other map on an area basis.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. The only thing that uses the CDBG target area is the code enforcement program. But so you can see how, so again, you know, areas like along Foster and along Simpson that have broken up sidewalk and are areas that we are talking about replacing sidewalks. Now, one of the things that is one of these applications is a replacing portions of sidewalk, not whole stretches, but just, you know, more like the 50-50 sidewalk program that we've had in the past. It's where we can just replace individual squares or numbers of squares. This is the first time that Public Works has proposed doing part of that program using CDBG in eligible areas. So that will be something that we want to have Laura here so that you can ask questions and understand how that change is being recommended, because that is a change from prior years. We have not done any kind of sidewalk replacement on a individual sort of squares of it. We've always done it in larger stretches when we have done it. Like we at one point a number of years ago did a sidewalk along part of Hartree that didn't ever have a sidewalk, but was an eligible area, and that was partly because it was a one of the routes that kids were walking from farther south in Evanston to get up to ETHS, and it was a safety issue. So, you know, we really try to, and those sorts of notes and explanations are made in the individual applications. So we'll get into all the details of those.
Yeah, I assume Laura will have plenty to say to us about the sidewalks because she gave quite a detailed presentation about plans for, you know, improving a lot of our sidewalks in the community. And that's also something we've talked about with our ARPA funds is trying
and I'm going to also bring up another thing with ARPA. One of the things, every federal source of funding has different peculiarities, shall we say. CDBG, the minute you spend more than $2,000 for construction projects, you are subject, and it is not housing rehab of a property with fewer than 8 units, you're subject to Davis-Bacon prevailing wage, which is very close to state prevailing wage. So it is basically union scale, okay? ARPA, if we fund our nonprofits for their relatively small but important public facilities improvements, with ARPA, unless they have other funding in it from the federal government that would require Davis-Bacon wages, they are exempt from Davis-Bacon wages. And one of the things I think we need to consider is using our CDBG for capital projects that are because anything the city does is subject to prevailing wage no matter what, because that's a state requirement.
Okay.
And so if we can help our nonprofits with non-CDBG but federal money that doesn't require that Davis-Bacon compliance, it isn't that big a change in cost if it's things like electrical and plumbing work, because that is all licensed. But if you're doing, like in a childcare center, say they're trying to reconfigure a wall to make a classroom bigger so that they can deal with the issues of greater space per kid and have more kids there. It can change you can get residential contractors who can do that kind of work. But if you're using CDBG, they have to pay Davis-Bacon wages and do the compliance. And in many cases, it's very difficult to get contractors to even bid on it. And the contractors that are used to doing union contracts are not going to take on a $50,000 tiny little rehab. We have been working with one of the childcare centers for 3 years to try to get their lead water line replaced. They actually had 2 water lines, which we don't know quite why they did, but it was just a weird thing about the building was built. But one of them is a lead line, and they had higher than DCFS allowed lead in their water when it was tested. It was below the 5, whatever the measurement is for lead, but it was DCFS wants lower. And, between their 2 weeks where they have shut down, where they do cleaning and projects like that, and trying to deal with getting a contractor who will actually do a really deep water line, we haven't gotten it done yet. And the Davis-Bacon stuff doesn't help at all, because a bunch of the contractors just won't touch it. So this is the type of thing, I'm not saying that particular project, but these are the types of things that we may be able to help overcome if we look at how we use our different federal funds based on the projects that can be easily done in them. And of course, the area we're talking about, 8092, and then hopefully, if I can get it qualified, the part of 8102 in South Evanston, are the areas that we're talking about for the equitable and inclusive recovery, the geographic focus, which also puts more focus on infrastructure and capital projects on behalf of those neighborhoods. So a little bit long-winded. I hope it wasn't completely confusing, but this is kind of what we're trying to do to figure out how best to use our federal funding.
Right.
And there are situations like just the restrictions and requirements that come with different funding that make one much easier to use for certain circumstances than others.
Councilmember Burns, do you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to say, and Laura may have gotten into this, but if you want to, the gap infill request for funding is for an area. If you type in 1655 Foster Street, which is the address of Fleetwood, into Google, you can pull up a street view, and you'll see it's basically right across the street from Fleetwood Jourdain Center. The sidewalk gap starts at Dewey, goes east. The way it's explained, I think, in what we have, it it appears as though the gap is between Dewey and Jackson, and it's actually a much shorter area. It goes from Dewey to the alley, you'll see, and then there's a sidewalk, if we keep going back east, that starts up again right in front of the Emerson Square development, and that goes all the way until just before a parking lot that's used to, I think Volkswagen dealership owns it, and then there's a gap there between that parking lot and Jackson. So I just wanted to provide a little more context on that request.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
Do other committee members have questions about any of the 6 proposals that are in our packet tonight? And I know we'll have more time to talk about them next month, but if could get a head start if people have questions.
I had started to read the applications, but I think that I'd rather send my questions in writing so everybody can benefit from your responses to those questions.
thank you.
That sounds good. And as a reminder, if questions in writing can be sent by December 6th, that would be great.
I was interested in the affordable housing one in particular, and just if you can talk a little bit about how we advertise for property owners who want to be part of the program, and do we get a lot of applications, or do we have to pretty scramble around to even get the applicants that we end up working with? Or
We generally get quite a few. We actually have a wait list.
okay.
We're not completely out of the woods and getting our caught up from the shutdown due to COVID-19. That was, in fact, we put one project, stopped it completely and didn't do the interior work until 2021 because we were dealing with an older property owner, homeowner, who really didn't want people working in their house at all. So we had a very weird schedule. We have, I think, 4 projects in various stages right now. We get applicants through a lot of different sources. One of the things is our property standards.
Okay.
Inspectors refer people to the program if they believe that they could be eligible. Our water and sewer department people refer people to us. Sewer laterals are a real problem. Collapsed sewer laterals. We've done a remarkable number of collapsed sewer laterals. Very important too, because it makes, if the sewer lateral is completely collapsed, it makes the house unlivable. And it also, when they collapse, ultimately, if they're not fixed, it starts affecting the land, the sidewalk, and the street. So those are important. We do.
And that sounds like a pretty expensive repair. Then
they are
gobble up a lot of money.
But our Cdbg program can go up to $50,000 for a single family home. And then in multifamily, it's $20,000 per unit is our, and there was one time we actually had a situation where we were trying to do some structural repair on a house that literally parts of it were sinking, and they had to drive down those pylon things and jack it up. And we had to come to the committee and say, hey, we need to have your agreement to let us go above the 50,000 only for this purpose, because we don't want to be driving the pylons in and then say, oh, we can't go any farther. And I think it ended up coming out to something like, it wasn't that much over 50,000, but it was over 50,000 to get that work done. But we have priorities for the type of projects, and we prioritize them based on urgency and need, anything that is a what we consider a life safety type of need, like collapsed sewer laterals, failing roofs, anything that is basically the envelope of the house or a major system that makes it run or not run. We prioritize over things that are in some cases important, but not quite as critical. I mean, we've done some major kitchen redos for people who just have really old, nothing's been upgraded. And when we do that, we put in energy efficient appliances. One of the things we're talking about is, should we start moving to trying to get houses to all electric? We aren't ready to make that jump just yet because we don't have the funding to do it, but that's something we want to talk about when we talk about trying to do, in essence, help implement the climate action and resilience plan, looking at housing.
Yeah, and when we spend some of our affordable housing money, plan money.
Exactly.
Lauren, did you? Lauren?
Yeah, I do have a question, and I apologize if I should know this, and I apologize I'm sucking on a cough drop. So in the case of multifamily housing, is the eligibility criteria the geography of the building? Like, does it matter who owns the multifamily? Because I'm just thinking about like the wealth generation and wealth creation, right, of investing in a multifamily.
No. What matters for CDBG for housing is the income of the household occupying the housing unit.
Okay. And then do they cap it so that it's just effectively mom and pop buildings by virtue of saying it can't be more than an 8-unit building, or it can't be more than a 6-unit building?
It can't be more than an 8-unit building. And one of the weird things about CDBG is we can do rehab on a condo, which is owner occupied.
Yeah.
But we can only do the non-common areas. But if it is in a building that has 8 or more units, it has to follow Davis-Bacon.
So okay.
Now, if you're using home funding, Davis-Bacon is triggered by a project, which can be multiple buildings that includes 12 or more housing units. So this is another lovely thing about federal regulations. They're not consistent from grant to grant, and they don't necessarily make sense. Really annoying, but
it's interesting. I mean, you can see,
and what the logic is, I don't know. Now, an important thing about CDBG, which is different from home, with CDBG, if it's a single unit, the household income has to be at or below 80% of the area median. In a 2-flat, only one of the units has to be income eligible. This has been very valuable as a way of helping 2-flats. It's whether they're both rental or whether it's an owner-occupied rental, owner-occupied and renting the second.
Right.
It allows us the opportunity to say, if the owner-occupant is eligible, they can rent their other unit at whatever they can get for it, which can help them afford their own property, because that can be a challenge, the taxes and everything like that. So,
but this is all happening in exclusively still in eligible census tracts, right?
No. Technically, you can do CDBG housing rehab is based on the household income
just
of
the income living. That's kind of incredible. I mean, that's
with
very double-edged sword.
With another cap. You have to have a cap on the value of the property.
Okay, that's it.
And that is an important one, because they don't want you to, I mean, you can have people who have very little quote income, but have enormous assets, for example.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out, how they
there is a way, those are weeded out. Yes,
that's what I was trying to figure that out. Yes, how to.
But an important thing about in multifamily with 3 or more units, I just want to make too, CDBG, only 51% of the units have to be occupied by income eligible people. But CDBG is generally smaller scale rehab. It's not like home, which you have to do comprehensive rehab. CDBG, you can fix some stuff, but you don't have to fix everything necessarily. I mean, we don't do something where we would leave anybody with a life safety violation and only fix one thing. So we have our own standard, which is if we want to make the house livable, we're not going to, like, oh, like we'll give you a new front step, but the, steps to your second floor are falling apart. And we're going to leave those the way they are. We make that decision that is just not what we are going to do. That we haven't helped somebody then.
Okay.
But it does, the important thing about CDBG is we can do some things on a just very limited basis. And one of the things is things like sewer laterals. We've done a number of situations where we just have fixed that. And that's the only thing that they need.
And is there a way, I'm sort of obsessed with this idea of trying not to do the rehab for someone who is asset rich and just as being cheap, right? So is there a way for the city to give preferential treatment based on I'm just thinking of a scenario of someone who owns multiple properties in low-income communities and the properties are small, so they qualify, but the actual owner owns multiple properties and is just not taking good care of them.
One of the things is when we do straight rental property, when it's straight investment properties, we have traditionally put income restrictions that are longer. We can increase the income restrictions. For example, we could say that it's not just that the household occupying it at the time of the completion of the work has to be income eligible. We can say they have to be affordable at this income level for the next 10 years or something like that.
Okay, so there's some authority there.
So we have flexibility to do that. For the most part, the larger the larger property owners really don't want to deal with CDBG. They would be happy if we just gave them the money and let them manage their project. But we don't do that because with CDBG, the regulations are so crazy, and the lead-based paint requirements and stuff like that, is that SEPA, Community Partners for Affordable Housing, manages the construction projects. So they function as a construction manager. This is very valuable for especially our older homeowners who don't have the capacity to write a scope of work and get 3 comparable bids and make sure they've done the lead-based paint testing and all the stuff that goes along with HUD funding. I can't remember which one of our legal staff came in at one point and said, why on earth does the city actually have the rehab do the management of this stuff? Because God, the liability to the city. I'm like, well, the liability to the city, if we don't do it, is we give the money back to HUD. So it really is. It's really, just by its nature, it ends up being targeted at very small.
That makes sense. No, that's good to hear. I don't doubt the value of the program. I was just thinking about,
how could people get around this?
I'm just thinking about what the safeties are against it.
Okay. Ugo, you have a question?
Hold on. I actually have 2.
Okay.
One was triggered by something, a comment that Sarah made. And I think Lauren kind of answered my main question, which was that in theory, we could actually be financing a slum landlord. I'm not implying that our wonderful city has slum landlords in it, but there is a possibility that we will be financing a slum landlord on repairs to a building instead of citing that owner to make the repairs on his or her own.
Yes.
So that is something that it was also in my mind, Lauren, because I mean, it's a risk. And what is the latitude that this committee has to deny a project like that, or to not approve it, or to look for different options? So that's my number one question. But the other question came by a comment you made, Sarah, and you mentioned a value, a cap on the value of the property that we can give some of that rehab money. And what are the guidelines for that cap? How is that value established, and where do we say, is it a percentage of the community of that particular census tract value for a 2 flat, or?
What it is IDA has these medians, I think they are, and they are by geography, and we follow that process, which is what SEPA does for its housing rehab projects too. It's the safest thing, because then you have, it's much easier than saying, oh, we're going to look at the latest Zillow. Normally what it is it's generally with CDBG, nobody does rehabs that are on properties that are above the median in the community.
And how is that established? Is it based on the tax records, or is it based on
what I was saying
recent
is IDA
sales?
has developed a bunch of developed this, and they
So we
release
just
them
follow
by
their
community, and we
charts.
follow that. Yep.
Okay.
Just as we, sometimes it's best just to use an existing system that is used by lots of people rather than do your own system. Yep. And there's nothing that says we have to do rehab for even if a landlord or property owner applies for assistance, we can deny them for reasons, if we're just saying, we have to assess if we want to help that landlord based on whether or not they have the capacity to do their own rehab. And one of the challenges is when you get some of these property owners who have every single property in a separate LLC and things like that, you can also just kind of say, we can't determine eligibility based on our criteria, therefore we won't give you rehab money. Now, many, many years ago, again, it was very shortly after I joined the city, so this would be like 15 years ago working on, there was a property in South Evanston that a not good landlord who is no longer owns any property in the city was not managing well. This landlord took a number of Section 8 tenants, housing choice vouchers. And at one point, the housing authority did an inspection and said they would not allow any more voucher holders to be in that property. The property was in disrepair. The property superintendent was living in the laundry room and using a bucket and pouring it down the sewer outside. This was really quite a disgusting thing. It was a nuisance property, shall we say, and the police were there constantly. And this property owner applied for a housing rehab loan. And we denied it. And we actually denied it at the time because one of the things another thing with investment properties, especially that we don't waive, is we want to see a loan to value ratio of their total debt, they're on their property. And this would have put, because we do these as loans, not as grants. And so this property, if it were given a CDBG loan, even at the $20,000 per unit, would have been well over the loan to value ratio that was our maximum. And so that was the basis that we denied it on. And this property owner actually filed a complaint with HUD that we weren't helping this, repair this property. And we had an investigation. We had Herb Ziegeldorf come and spend quite a bit of time with us and go through everything and said, nope, you don't have to fund this. You're absolutely fine. So, but that's the only time in my history here that we've ever had a property owner who we really were like, we don't want to help this person apply. So.
And are all of these loans in the instance of single family? Are they also loans or are they grants at that point?
They are loans as of right now.
0% interest or?
They're 0% interest and
Okay.
they are generally deferred. In other words,
Yeah.
they only pay when there's a property transfer or sale. We actually are working with SEPA to figure out if we can go to forgivable loans on all of them. Because that's what we would like to do. We would rather help our lower income people build equity. But one of the challenges is, remember we said we have that 102,500 in program income?
Mhm.
That's that
that.
program income is loan payments.
Mhm.
And the loan payments go back into the program. We have what is known as a revolving loan.
Yeah.
And so we have to figure out if we can get more consistent sources to be able to do that. We've talked about doing it tiered. So maybe saying if somebody's below 50% of the area median, it would be a grant. Or it would probably be done as a forgivable loan just because that's generally. So we need to work on that, but we're just not there yet.
So currently it's a lien. It's like a second position lien.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
You know,
I'll stop
IDA
talking.
has another rule about those loans, and it is that it's a gradual
They have a
grant
forgivable.
turning into a grant, right?
It's a forgivable loan over 10 years. And
Correct.
actually, if you look at that, at the budget in this application, you will see funding sources in there. And so we have Cdbg Entitlement. So this is page, I don't know what page of the packet, but the Cdbg Entitlement we're asking for is 150,000. We have 124,000 and some odd change of revolving loan income that we received in 2020 that we haven't spent because we haven't caught up with our, caught the program up. We're not going through as much money. And then you can see the 102,500 that is what we've received so far in 2021. And then you see 140,000, which is IDA single family rehab grant. That is funding that IDA started allocating for very similar things. The income restrictions are 80% of area median or below. The maximum amount that can be spent per property is 40,000, but it is a forgivable loan. And so what we are doing right now is one of the reasons we've built up a little more program income is because we've been directing people who are eligible, we've been directing people first to that single family rehab program from IDA because then they get forgivable loans. But the problem we have is there are certain things that we can't use that funding for. You can't do two flats, even if they're owner occupied. You can't do other kinds of rental. They have a weird thing in their requirements that you can't use their funding on a house that is in a trust. Now, this is something that annoys me. We used to have this in our program too, and we got rid of it. There's nothing wrong with the house that's in a trust if you look at who the beneficiary of the trust is. So if somebody has put their house in a trust for estate planning reasons so that they don't have to go through, their heirs don't have to go through probate and stuff like that, but they are the clear beneficiaries and it's, then we don't have any problem with doing a rehab on a house that's in a trust, but IDA will not do that. I actually see it as, when we took that out, as a barrier to opportunity for lower income people, and that also really affected in many cases are people of color who are more likely to they actually are the majority of our rehab clients, because we're basically saying if you're ever going to need help from our program, you can't use estate planning processes that everybody else uses that help preserve their assets and pass them on to their heirs, which is really discriminatory. I mean, it's a systemic inequity, I should say. And so we took that out of our program, but it had been in there for years. So they're just weird things in programs that who knows why it was put in there way back when. We've had a housing rehab program since 1975. And I got to tell you, one of the other reasons I would rather go to forgivable loans is we actually have to keep track of those loans. And we have gotten payments on some loans that were written in the early 80s. And it's, you know, it gives us a whole lot of compliance that I'd rather not have to worry about. So,
well, boy,
it's a complicated program.
Right, yeah, but and I have a feeling, you know, because I think this committee is going to be have the challenge of just, you know, helping with ARPA funds for affordable housing and developing a plan and reaching residents who need that kind of help. So we're going to be digging ever deeper into the intricacies of all of this. Does anybody have any other questions for this evening? Because we certainly will have a chance again next month.
And we will have Rob Anthony here next month too, which I think will be helpful. He's
great. Yeah, right. Okay.
I do have one question if no other committee members have a question.
Okay.
We have Sue Lowell back from the public that asked a question regarding the slide we were just showing. She was asking, what is the current demand for the property maintenance program, which I'm assuming that's housing rehab. Is there a wait list? Yes, there is a wait list, but how many properties are currently using it? Now, I know we have current ongoing programs, but I don't know how many have been taken care of.
I don't know how many are on the wait list right now. We had, but we can find that out. We can certainly put that in our responses. Chris Renard, who manages that, actually went through, and we'd had some people on for a really long time. And we actually had some people who came up as eligible, like you're next on the list last year. And they were like, come back to me later, you know. So we've had some really, it's been a very strange last, you know, year and a half. And our program, we were basically doing no rehabs for a significant part of 2020. And our rehab specialist retired at the beginning or end of April, I can't even remember. And so for a short period of time, we had nobody. And then we talked him into coming back on a part-time basis. So 2020 was really very low level of activity on rehab. In 2021, we didn't actually get our agreement with SEPA until I think it was March. And again, one of the things that's happened to virtually every CDBG community I've heard of that's got a rehab program, especially ones that work with an organization like SEPA that does their rehab for them. Many of those organizations have also been doing things like doing a lot of the rental assistance programs and things like that. And so all of our housing providers who are in this kind of work have been fragmented and not necessarily focusing as much on the rehabs as they had been when it was a little less other stuff going on. But we expect to get our program up and, you know, to a much more robust level. SEPA recently hired another construction management person, so that will allow us to increase our output on this, because we want to see it back up to higher levels than it's been in the last year.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to more conversation about the affordable housing piece and the infrastructure and the other things next month. Well, then we have one other business item for this evening, which is the election of a vice chair. We did get a nomination, and the nominee has indicated a willingness to serve as vice chair. But before we take a vote, I'll open up to the floor if there are any nominations at this 11th hour. Or otherwise, I will entertain a motion to move to elect Kathy Feingold as the vice chair of our committee. Somebody make that motion.
I would be happy to make that motion. Thank you, Kathy.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, then if you take the roll, Sarah or Marion.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Monica Bobo,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Kathy Feingold,
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Joanne Zolovic,
Yep, Joanne says yes.
and the motion passes 9-0.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Kathy. It's
Yeah, thank you, Kathy.
we
Happy to do
hope
it.
it won't be a huge job.
Well, you're going to always be here,
Well, I
right?
hope we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. Okay. Then we're ready for any public comment, Marion.
Yes, so I checked the online sign up for public comment. There was one person, Doreen Price, that signed up to speak.
Mhm.
However, it looks like she did not join the meeting today. She commented in the form that she wanted to ask whether can many CDBG inspection be zoomed and grouped to reduce costs. So I think what we can do is eventually follow up to see what specific questions you wanted to ask, and I can follow up and share with the rest of the group if I can get hold of her.
Great.
And then as far as public comment, I don't have anybody else signed up. If anybody wanted to do public comment, if you want to raise your hand, I can promote you so that you can share public comment. But so far, we do not have anyone else. I'm going to give it a couple minutes. Yeah, there's no other public comment so far.
Okay.
I think I've completely confused everybody.
Right. Okay. Well, then I think I don't believe we have any other business to come before the committee, so I will declare us adjourned. And we've got a lot of reading to do before our meeting next month, but we will be prepared, and I look forward to seeing everybody in December. That's December 14th. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
kudos to the
Thanks,
everybody.
aspiring violinist in the background.
Congratulations.
Gosh, I'm so sorry. That's totally me. I didn't realize you can hear her. I was
Oh, no,
trying
no.
I moved downstairs to
great.
flee the noise.
Lauren,
Sorry.
I thought it was coming from our house, so I'm glad.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'll put myself on mute more next time.
No, do not. No.
It was quite nice.
It was a violin. Whoever said that knows their instruments. You're right.
All right.
Nice.
Yes.
Bye,
Right.
everybody.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.